He stood there, soaked in the rain outside the gates of my mansion, a place he'd never stepped foot in. This was the same man who told me 10 years ago that I was worthless without him. He was begging for a second chance, but he had no idea that my new life had no room for him and that my revenge was just getting started. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. Write in the comments what country you are watching us from. I'm very curious to know. Enjoy listening. The start of the story. To understand how a man ends up begging in the rain, you have to understand the world he destroyed first. 10 years ago, my world was very small, and its name was Mark. We met in college. He was the ambitious business major with eyes that saw skyscrapers where others saw empty lots. I was in culinary school with dreams of opening my own small bistro, but his dreams were bigger, louder, and they demanded more space. So I made room. I packed my own ambitions away in a small box, placed it on a high shelf in my mind, and dedicated myself to his. I remember the night before his first major presentation at the firm. He was a nervous wreck, convinced he would fail. I stayed up with him until 3 a.m., not just making coffee, but redesigning his slides, rephrasing his key points, and role-playing as the tough CEO he needed to impress. He got the promotion. When he came home, flowers in hand, he said, "We did it, Elena." And I believed him. I believed every sacrifice was a joint investment in our future. The lunches I packed weren't just sandwiches. They were carefully crafted fuel to get him through grueling days. The quiet, clean home he returned to wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary I built to shield him from the stresses of the world. I was the chief architect of his success, the silent partner in the firm of Mark Jennings. I poured every ounce of myself into his dream. I thought it was our dream. The first cracks in the foundation are never the ones that bring the house down. They're subtle. A fine line in the plaster you can almost convince yourself isn't there. For us, the cracks started appearing about a year before the end. Mark started staying late for board meetings that happened 3 times a week. When he came home, the smell of expensive perfume that wasn't mine clung to his suit. He grew distant, critical. One evening, I spent all day making his favorite dish, coq au vin. It was the meal I'd made on our 3rd date. He walked in, glanced at the table, and sighed. "Elena, can't we just order a pizza? I've been eating rich food with clients all day. This is too heavy." He didn't see the effort. He only saw an inconvenience. He started making comments about my appearance. "You should really do something with your hair," he'd say offhandedly. "My colleagues' wives are always so polished." The Fisher truly opened the night of the annual company dinner. He bought a new expensive suit for the occasion, but told me my favorite blue dress was a bit dated. I felt small before we even arrived. And that's where I met Chloe. She was introduced as his new star protege, a full decade younger than me, dressed in a sharp, unforgiving dress, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She shook my hand, her grip limp, her eyes scanning my dated dress. "Oh, so you're the little woman at home," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "It must be so rewarding, holding down the fort while Mark conquers the world." It was a masterclass in condescension. Mark just laughed, oblivious, or perhaps complicit. A week later, while doing laundry, a receipt fell out of his suit pocket. A single charge from a high-end jewelry store for a diamond necklace that cost more than our first car. My heart hammered in my chest. That night, I confronted him, my hands shaking as I held the little slip of paper. He didn't even flinch. He just manufactured a lie with practiced ease. "Oh, that. It's a gift from my mother. Her 65th birthday is next month, remember?" I knew he was lying. My mother-in-law was allergic to gold and hadn't worn a necklace in 20 years. But I wanted so desperately to believe him that I let the lie settle in the air between us, another crack in the walls of our home. Our 15th anniversary was the day the walls came down. I told myself I would ignore the cracks, that I would plaster over them with love and effort. I spent 2 days preparing. I made a reservation at the fancy restaurant where he proposed. I bought a new dress, something modern, something polished. I waited at the restaurant for 3 hours, sipping water, checking my phone, the hostess shooting me pitying glances. He never showed. He didn't even call. I went home to a cold, empty house, the single rose I'd bought for him already starting to wilt on the table. The next morning, my best friend Sarah came over. She didn't say anything at first. She just hugged me. Then she showed me her phone. There it was, on Chloe's public Instagram profile. A picture of her and Mark on a white sand beach, his arm wrapped tightly around her. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and around her neck was the diamond necklace. The caption read, "Best anniversary with my one and only." The date of the post was yesterday, my anniversary. Mark walked in an hour later, his suitcase in hand, his face a mask of cold indifference. There was no shame, no apology, just annoyance, as if my heartbreak was a tedious errand he had to run. I held up the phone, tears streaming down my face. He just shrugged. "Look at you, Elena," he said, his voice flat. "You've let yourself go. You're a relic from my old life. Chloe is vibrant. She has a future. I've wasted my best years with you." He walked over to the desk where we kept our financial documents. "And just so we're clear," he continued, pulling out a file, "the house is in my name. Our joint savings? I moved them to a private account last month. You have nothing." Every word was a hammer blow, systematically demolishing the life I thought we had built together, until all that was left was rubble. Having nothing wasn't the end of it. The final humiliation was a performance for the whole neighborhood to see. 2 days later, a formal eviction notice was taped to the door of my own home. My home. He didn't even have the decency to tell me himself. I was packing my life into cardboard boxes, memories turning into clutter, when he pulled up. Not in his sensible sedan, but in a brand new cherry red sports car. Chloe was in the passenger seat, wearing oversized sunglasses, looking bored. He didn't get out of the car. He just watched as I dragged my last 2 suitcases onto the lawn. He looked at his watch, impatient. Then he had the nerve to say, "Can you hurry this up? We have dinner reservations." I stood there, on the curb, surrounded by the pathetic fragments of my life, the woman who had given up everything for him. He put the car in drive, and as they pulled away, Chloe looked back at me, a smirk playing on her lips. They were laughing. The sound of their laughter followed me as I stood there, crying and lost, watching them drive off into my future. That sound, that image of them laughing at my pain, that was the seed from which my new life would eventually grow. Not a life of love, but a life of purpose, a life of revenge. The first few months were a blur of gray. I was living on my friend Sarah's lumpy pull-out couch, which was an act of kindness I could never repay. I woke up each morning with a hollow ache in my chest, the ghost of a life I no longer had. The world I had helped build was gone, and I was a refugee with no country. I sent out hundreds of resumes. I applied for everything: line cook, sous chef, even dishwasher. The rejections piled up. "A 15-year gap in your resume is just too much," one hiring manager told me, his face a mixture of pity and dismissal. The industry has changed. My days were spent in a torturous routine. I'd apply for jobs in the morning, get rejected in the afternoon, and at night, I'd commit the ultimate act of self-flagellation. I'd look at their social media. Mark and Chloe were documenting their grand tour of my stolen life. Pictures of them in Paris, clinking champagne glasses with the Eiffel Tower in the background. a video of them on a yacht in the Caribbean, Chloe showing off a new diamond ring. Mark's caption read, "Upgraded." Every post was a perfectly curated stab to my heart, a reminder that they were living a life funded by my sacrifice. The lowest point came when I ran into some old friends, a couple we used to host for dinner parties, at a grocery store. I was in sweatpants, my hair a mess, counting my change to see if I could afford a carton of eggs. They were polite but distant. As I walked down the next aisle, I overheard the wife whisper to her husband, "God, what happened to her? She looks awful. It's so pathetic how she let him be her whole life." Pathetic. That word echoed in my head for days. I went back to Sarah's apartment, curled up on the couch, and for the first time, I didn't just feel sad. I felt a profound, soul-crushing despair. I had truly, completely become nothing. I stayed on that couch for 3 days, barely eating, barely moving. Sarah, bless her soul, finally had enough. She came home from work, put a bag of groceries on the small coffee table, and said, "I'm not watching you fade away. You're cooking for me tonight." I wanted to refuse, but I didn't have the energy. And honestly, I owed her. I owed her for the roof over my head, for the kindness she showed me when the world had turned its back. So I got up. I moved like an old woman, my joints stiff with inactivity and grief. I opened the grocery bag. Onions, garlic, tomatoes, a fresh loaf of crusty bread. Simple ingredients. I started chopping the onions, and as I did, something strange happened. The rhythm of the knife on the cutting board was familiar, grounding. The smell of the garlic hitting the hot olive oil was like an old friend. I wasn't just going through the motions. I was creating. I made a simple pasta sauce, a recipe so deeply ingrained in my memory I could do it with my eyes closed. We ate in comfortable silence. After a few bites, Sarah put her fork down and looked at me, her eyes wide. "Elena," she said, her voice filled with an awe I hadn't heard in years. This is incredible." And it was. It was rich and deep and full of a flavor I thought I had lost. That's when she said the words that would change everything. "Elena, people would pay a fortune for this. You didn't just support Mark's dream, you put your own on hold. It's time to bring it back." It was like a switch flipped in my mind. She was right. Mark hadn't just taken my past, he had tried to take my future too. That night, I pulled out a dusty box from the bottom of my suitcase. Inside was my old culinary school knife set and a worn, leather-bound book. It was my grandmother's recipe book, filled with her handwriting, detailing unique, forgotten dishes from the old country. Recipes no one else had. It was more than a book. It was a legacy. It was an arsenal. And as I held it in my hands, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a chef, and I had my secret weapon. The next day, the woman on the couch was gone. In her place was a woman with a plan. It started small. I used the last of the meager savings I had to buy ingredients and high-quality disposable containers. I started a small catering business right out of Sarah's tiny kitchen, calling it Traditions. I cooked the food I knew, the food from my grandmother's book, hearty, soulful dishes that told a story. My alarm was set for 4 a.m. Every morning, I'd go to the farmer's market, haggling for the freshest produce, my hands raw from carrying heavy crates. I'd cook all day, the small apartment filled with the smells of roasting herbs and simmering sauces. I'd pack the meals myself and deliver them on the city bus. It was grueling, back-breaking work. There were setbacks that almost broke me. I remember one of my first big orders, a lunch for a corporate office. I got the address wrong and delivered it an hour late. The client was furious and refused to pay. I sat on the bus ride home, crying into a box of cold lasagna, convinced I was a failure. But then, Small victories started to happen. A small law firm I delivered to loved the food so much they offered me a daily contract to cater their lunches. It was the first steady income I'd had in a year. Sarah helped me set up an Instagram account. I started taking beautiful photos of my dishes, the steam rising from a bowl of stew, the glistening crust of a freshly baked pie. I told the stories behind the recipes, my grandmother's story. People started to notice. The account grew from 100 followers to 1,000, then 10,000. Emails started pouring in, requests for private dinners, for wedding catering. I was working 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a burning desire to prove him wrong. Every dish I plated, every new client I won was a brick in the foundation of my new life. The tipping point came from an unexpected place. A prominent food blogger, a woman notorious for her scathing reviews, ordered from my service anonymously. I treated it like any other order. A week later, an article was published on her massively popular blog titled, "How a Secret Kitchen is Saving Our City's Soul." She raved about the authenticity, the flavor, the story. She called my food a revelation. My phone didn't stop ringing for a week. The business exploded. I was no longer just a woman in a kitchen. I was a brand. With the new influx of orders, I finally had the financial credibility to walk into a bank. After being rejected 3 times before, I secured a small business loan. I found a tiny rundown space in a burgeoning neighborhood and poured every ounce of my energy and money into it. 6 months later, Elena's table opened its doors. It was small, with only 10 tables, but it was mine. From the opening night, it was a sensation. You couldn't get a reservation for months. The success was overwhelming, intoxicating. But I didn't stop. I remembered Mark's ambition, and for the first time, I felt my own ignite. I expanded. I opened a second, larger location downtown, then a third. I launched a line of gourmet sauces based on my grandmother's recipes, which were picked up by a national grocery chain. I became a celebrated chef, a businesswoman. I was featured on magazine covers. I won prestigious awards. And with the profits, I bought myself a house. Not a house, a mansion. A sprawling, modern masterpiece of glass and stone overlooking the city. I bought a sleek black luxury car, the kind Mark always dreamed of. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was building an empire on the very spot he had left a crater. While I was building my world, Mark was busy setting his on fire. His life with Chloe, which looked so glamorous on Instagram, was a house of cards built on my money. Chloe was not a partner. She was a parasite. She loved the lifestyle, not the man. She bled him dry with shopping sprees, extravagant vacations, and demands for bigger and better things. Mark, blinded by his ego and desperate to keep up the facade, made a series of increasingly reckless business investments. He thought he had the golden touch, but without my steadying influence, my quiet research, my thoughtful advice, he was just a gambler. He poured what was left of our savings into a high-risk tech startup that went bankrupt within 6 months. He lost everything. The day the money ran out, Chloe's affection vanished with it. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she packed her designer bags, took the last of his cash, and walked out, telling him, "I attached myself to a rocket ship, not a sinking anchor. You're old, Mark, and now you're boring." The cruelty was poetic. He lost his job shortly after, his performance suffering from the stress of his financial ruin. The bank foreclosed on the house, my house. Within 2 years of leaving me, Mark Jennings, the man who was going to conquer the world, was left with nothing but a mountain of debt and a single bitter lesson in what it truly means to be worthless. The first time I saw him again was about 5 years after he left. I was attending a charity gala held at a 5-star hotel. I was one of the event's sponsors. I pulled up to the entrance in my new car, feeling powerful and confident in a custom-made gown. A valet rushed to open my door. As I stepped out, Our eyes met. It was Mark. He was thinner, with gray at his temples and a weariness in his eyes I'd never seen before. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting valet uniform. The shock on his face was immediate, followed by a wave of shame so profound it was almost visible. The conqueror of the world was parking my car. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I gave him a polite, almost imperceptible nod, the kind of acknowledgement you give to a stranger who holds a door for you. Then I turned and walked up the red carpet, leaving him standing there in my rearview mirror, a ghost from a life I no longer recognized. A few weeks later, he showed up at Elena's table. He didn't have a reservation. He just stood at the entrance looking pathetic and out of place until the hostess came to get me from my office. I agreed to see him, not for him, but for me. I needed this final chapter to close. We sat at a secluded table in the corner. He started to talk, his voice cracking. He gave a long, rambling speech about how he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. How Chloe was a meaningless fling, a symptom of a midlife crisis. He said he had thought of me every day, that he always loved me. He was crying, actual tears running down his face. I let him finish. I listened to his entire, pathetic performance without saying a word. When he was done, a heavy silence hung between us. I finally looked at him, my gaze clear and steady. "Mistake?" I said, my voice calm and low. "No, Mark. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. You made a choice. You chose to betray me, to steal from me, and to humiliate me. You didn't love me. You loved that I made you comfortable. My success wasn't built for you to come back to. It was built on the ashes of the life you burned down." He stared at me, speechless. He had expected me to melt, to see his tears, and remember the woman I used to be. But that woman was gone. She had died on the curb outside our old house. I calmly raised my hand and signaled for my restaurant manager. "David," I said, "could you please show Mr. Jennings out? He's finished here." As two security guards gently but firmly escorted a sputtering Mark to the door, a man approached our table. It was Michael, an architect I'd been dating for the past year. He was kind, brilliant, and he looked at me like I was the one who had built the world. He took my hand, his thumb gently stroking my knuckles. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. I looked at Michael, then glanced towards the door. Mark was standing there, held by the security guards, watching us. He saw Michael's hand in mine. He saw the easy affection, the genuine smile on my face, and in that moment he finally understood. He hadn't just lost the money or the status. He had lost me. Forever. He hadn't just been replaced by a younger woman. He had been replaced by a better man. That was his final defeat. That was my ultimate victory. In the end, I didn't need revenge to destroy him. My success was enough. The best revenge is, and always will be, a life well lived. Have you ever had to start over and build a better life for yourself? Share your story of triumph in the comments below. And for more stories like this one, make sure to like and subscribe.